Hey everyone, welcome back to the Checkered Sky channel where we dive into true crime stories. Today, we're diving into a chilling case from the streets of Chicago. A story so twisted it'll leave you questioning who you can really trust. This is the case of Yolanda Holmes, a woman whose life was cut short in a way no one saw coming. It was September 2nd, 2012, in Chicago's Uptown neighborhood. Yolanda Holmes, a 45-year-old woman known for her warm smile and tireless work ethic, was at home in her apartment. Around 4 a.m., the stillness of her apartment was shattered. Yolanda wasn't alone. Her boyfriend, Curtis Wyatt, was staying over. What unfolded next was chaos. An intruder entered the apartment, and in a matter of moments, Yolanda's life was taken. Curtis was caught in the fray, injured and in need of urgent medical attention. The scene left investigators with more questions than answers. Who would target Yolanda? Was this a random act, or was there something deeper at play? Detectives noted the layout of Yolanda's home. Nothing seemed out of place, no signs of a forced break-in. Yet, the precision of the act suggested intent. Yolanda's loved ones were devastated, describing her as a pillar of strength, someone who didn't have enemies. But in true crime, things are rarely as simple as they seem. Investigators began their work, canvassing the neighborhood for witnesses. They wanted to know about Yolanda's life, her relationships, her routines. The police were tight-lipped, but one thing was clear: this wasn't a robbery gone wrong. Yolanda's belongings were untouched. The motive was a mystery, and the trail was already growing cold. For those of you hooked on true crime, cases like this grab you because they're layered. Yolanda's story isn't just about what happened that morning. It's about the web of connections, choices, and secrets that led to it. To understand this true crime puzzle, we need to step into Yolanda's life, a life filled with hard work, generosity, and unbreakable family ties. Let's explore who she was, the people she held close, and the bonds that shaped her world. Yolanda Holmes, at 45, was a force of nature. Standing just 5 feet tall, her nickname, Yogi, or Shorty, belied her larger-than-life presence. She owned Nappy Headz, a bustling hair salon on North Broadway, where she'd built a loyal clientele over 15 years. The salon wasn't just a business, it was a community hub. Yolanda hosted back-to-school parties, handing out supplies to kids, and opened her doors for local events. Her uncle, James Newman, described her as someone who always tried to help people. Friends like Ayanna Anderson, a stylist at Nappy Headz, echoed this, saying Yolanda's warmth made everyone feel like family. Her life wasn't without challenges. Yolanda was a single mother, pouring her heart into raising her only child, Kwame Wilson. Born when Yolanda was in her early 20s, Kwame was her pride and joy. She doted on him, buying him fancy clothes, jewelry, and a Mustang. When Kwame faced legal trouble over a BB gun, Yolanda hired an attorney. She even helped him land a job. Their bond was so strong that Kwame tattooed her name across his shoulder, and Yolanda reciprocated with his name inked on her. At Nappy Headz, Kwame was a familiar face, often hanging out as a salon baby, charming clients with his smile. To Yolanda, her son was her future, and she worked tirelessly to give him opportunities she never had. Less is known about Yolanda's romantic past, but her ex-husband cast a shadow. He was serving a life sentence for a double homicide, a fact that kept him distant from her later years. Detectives briefly considered him as a lead, wondering if his criminal ties could connect to the crime, but his incarceration made direct involvement unlikely. Yolanda had moved on, focusing on her salon and her son. Her on-again, off-again relationship with Curtis Wyatt, the boyfriend injured that morning, was rekindling at the time of the incident. Curtis's presence in the apartment raised questions, but police found no evidence tying him to the act. Still, his account of the intruder and their struggle left gaps investigators couldn't ignore. Let's dive into the critical first steps of the investigation, where every detail could lead closer to the truth: or deeper into the mystery. It all began with a frantic 911 call just after 4:15 a.m. on September 2, 2012. Curtis Wyatt, Yolanda's on-again, off-again boyfriend, dialed emergency services from her apartment in the 1000 block of West Montrose Avenue. His voice, strained with panic, reported an intruder who had attacked them while they slept. Curtis said he'd fought off the assailant, but Yolanda was unresponsive. He pleaded for help, his words punctuated by shock and urgency. Chicago PD officers arrived within minutes, securing the high-rise apartment building. They found Curtis, injured and shaken, with blood on his clothes and wounds that needed medical attention. Paramedics rushed him to a nearby hospital, where he was treated for cuts and bruises sustained in what he described as a struggle. The scene was grim, and detectives from the Chicago PD's homicide unit, including John Carolus and Michelle Wood, took charge. Their mission was clear: map the crime scene, collect evidence, and reconstruct the events that led to this tragedy. The apartment, part of the newly built Wilson Yard complex, was supposed to be a safe haven for Yolanda and her family. Now, it was a puzzle box of clues. The crime scene examination revealed a chaotic but contained struggle. In the bedroom, detectives found Yolanda's body, marked by a gunshot wound to the head and several stab wounds. The precision and intensity suggested what Michelle Wood, a fellow Chicago PD homicide detective, later called overkill, an act meant to ensure no chance of survival. Blood spatter covered the walls, painting a picture of a desperate fight. A gun with a broken handle lay on the bedroom floor. In the kitchen, investigators noticed a knife block missing a paring knife, which they later recovered near Yolanda's body. The weapon's absence from its usual place hinted at premeditation. Had the intruder known where to find it? Then there was an unusual find: a broken headphone cord or earpiece tangled among the bedroom's debris. Its presence raised eyebrows. Was it dropped by the intruder during the struggle? Each item, the gun, the knife, the earpiece, was bagged and sent for forensic analysis, potential keys to unlocking the case. Detectives turned their attention to Curtis Wyatt, the only other person known to be in the apartment that morning. As Yolanda's boyfriend, he was the first suspect. Curtis, still recovering in the hospital, was cooperative but rattled when detectives questioned him. He recounted the night's events. He and Yolanda had been rekindling their relationship and were asleep when an intruder burst in. Curtis claimed the man opened fire, striking Yolanda, and then attacked him. He described wrestling with the assailant, managing to disarm him before the man fled. Curtis insisted he chased the intruder out of the apartment, then returned to find Yolanda beyond help. His story explained his injuries and the broken gun, but one detail gnawed at investigators. There was no sign of forced entry. The apartment's door was intact, its locks undisturbed. How had the intruder gained access? Curtis's account, while plausible, left gaps that detectives couldn't ignore. To test his story, police brought Curtis in for a formal interrogation once he was discharged from the hospital. The questioning was intense but methodical, with detectives probing for inconsistencies. Curtis stuck to his narrative, describing the intruder as a man he didn't recognize, wearing headphones, a detail that matched the earpiece found at the scene. He denied any involvement in Yolanda's death, emphasizing their rekindled romance and his affection for her. But his demeanor, perhaps shaken by trauma, raised suspicions. To settle doubts, detectives offered Curtis a polygraph test, a tool often used to gauge truthfulness in high-stakes cases. Curtis agreed, perhaps hoping to clear his name. The results, however, were troubling. The polygraph indicated deception, suggesting Curtis might be withholding information. True crime fans know polygraphs aren't foolproof. They measure stress, not guilt. But the failure cast a shadow over Curtis's story. Detectives pressed harder, but without concrete evidence tying him to the act, they couldn't make an arrest. Curtis remained a person of interest, his role in the case unclear. The crime scene offered more clues through forensic analysis. blood evidence painted a telling picture. Yolanda's blood was confined to the bedroom, concentrated around her body and the surrounding walls. Curtis's blood, however, was found in other areas, likely the hallway and living room, consistent with his claim of a struggle that moved through the apartment. This distribution suggested a third person's presence. If Curtis and Yolanda had fought alone, their blood would likely have mingled in the same space. The separation of blood pools indirectly supported Curtis's story of an intruder, though it didn't prove it. Detectives hoped DNA would provide a breakthrough. The broken earpiece was a prime candidate. Forensic techs tested it for biological evidence, recovering a DNA profile. They compared it to Yolanda, Curtis, and the National CODIS database, which holds millions of DNA records. The result? No match. The DNA belonged to an unknown individual, neither Yolanda nor Curtis, and it wasn't in the system. This was a double-edged sword. It bolstered the theory of a third person, but left investigators without a name. The lack of forced entry kept circling back to Curtis. Had he let someone in? Was he covering for someone? Detectives revisited the apartment's security footage, hoping to spot the intruder. Grainy video showed a man entering the building around the time of the incident, wearing headphones, just as Curtis described. The figure's face was unclear, but the earpiece tied him to the crime scene. The absence of a DNA match frustrated investigators, as did the polygraph's ambiguity. Curtis's injuries and the blood evidence suggested he'd fought someone, but his deception on the polygraph muddied the waters. Was he a victim, a liar, or something else? The gun and knife offered little help. Their surfaces were either too damaged or too clean for usable prints. The earpiece's DNA was their best lead, but without a suspect to compare it to, it was a dead end. Detectives canvassed Yolanda's building, interviewing neighbors who'd heard nothing unusual that morning. They checked her phone records and financials, looking for patterns. For now, Curtis remained in the spotlight, but the DNA and blood evidence hinted at a larger story. Who was the man in the headphones, and how did he slip into Yolanda's life so seamlessly? The Uptown neighborhood of Chicago carried on, but for Yolanda Holmes's loved ones, time seemed to stand still. By late 2012, the investigation into her death at her Wilson Yard apartment had hit a wall. True crime cases often hinge on a single breakthrough, and for Chicago PD detectives John Carolus and Michelle Wood, that moment was coming. Let's follow the investigation as it takes a digital turn, unraveling a timeline and a trail of phone records that would change everything. The investigation, now months old, was under pressure. The community, still grieving, grew restless. Yolanda Holmes, Yolanda's sister, told reporters she felt the police weren't prioritizing the case. Stylists at Nappy Headz, like Marcel Ray, echoed her frustration, noting detectives had visited the salon only once, right after the incident. Detectives, however, were working quietly, chasing leads that hadn't yet reached the public. They revisited the apartment building's surveillance footage, a critical piece of the puzzle. The grainy video, captured by cameras at the Wilson Yard complex, showed a man entering the main entrance at 4:32 a.m. that morning. He wore a hoodie, carried clothes on a hanger, and held a detergent bottle, an odd assortment for the pre-dawn hours. Most notably, he punched in an access code to enter, suggesting familiarity with the building. By 4:46 a.m., he exited, now in a different hoodie, passing a resident who later proved unrelated to the case. The 14-minute window aligned with Curtis's 911 call at 4:15 a.m., tightening the timeline of the incident. The man's headphones in the footage connected to the broken earpiece found in Yolanda's bedroom, but the DNA on it, as I said, didn't match anyone in the National CODIS database. Detectives needed more to identify him. They turned to Yolanda's life, looking for connections to someone who might have had access to her building's code. Her phone records became the next focus. Investigators discovered that Yolanda had 2 phones registered under her name, a detail that raised eyebrows. One phone, her primary device, was used for personal and business calls. The second phone's records opened a new avenue. Detectives mapped calls and texts from both devices, focusing on the days leading up to September 2nd. Yolanda's primary phone showed routine activity: calls to her sister Eunice, clients at Nappy Headz, and Curtis Wyatt. The second phone, however, told a different story. It was active in Uptown, making frequent calls to numbers Yolanda didn't typically contact. One number stood out. It appeared repeatedly in the hours before and after the incident. Cell phone records were crucial, Assistant State's Attorney Maura White later told the Chicago Tribune. The records also revealed texts, cryptic but suggestive of planning. One message, sent hours before the incident, referenced handling business. While not explicit, it hinted at coordination. Detectives needed to identify the users of these phones, but the pieces were falling into place. They interviewed Yolanda's inner circle again, asking about her generosity. Had she given a phone to someone? Her son, Kwame Wilson, came up. Kwame had been vocal about suspecting Curtis, telling Detective Wood he believed Wyatt was involved. But the phone records told a different story. The second phone's activity aligned with Kwame's movements, and the number it frequently called belonged to an associate named Eugene Spencer. This was the first time Spencer's name surfaced, a 22-year-old from Chicago's South Side. Detectives didn't jump to conclusions, they needed more. Surveillance footage was revisited with fresh eyes. The man in the hoodie, carrying a detergent bottle, didn't act like a stranger. His ease with the access code suggested he'd been to the building before. Detectives hypothesized he was either a resident or someone trusted by one. The detergent bottle was a curious detail, perhaps a prop to blend in, or a sign of a cleanup attempt. By mid-2013, the investigation was closing in. Detectives pulled financial records, noting Yolanda's bank accounts had been accessed post-mortem. Large withdrawals raised red flags. The second phone's records showed it was still active, now pinging in North Austin, miles from Uptown. Detectives tracked its movements, building a profile of its users' habits. Police also traced Eugene Spencer's number and found that around the same time Yolanda was killed, he was calling another woman, Loriana Johnson. Johnson, 23, lived in Chicago's far South Side. The phone records linked the three, Kwame, Spencer, and Johnson, in a web of communication that peaked around the crime. Spencer's phone showed he'd been near Yolanda's building that morning, his device pinging the same tower as the surveillance footage's timeline. The digital trail was undeniable. Someone Yolanda trusted had betrayed her. As 2013 drew to a close, the investigation into Yolanda Holmes's death was no longer a cold case. The second phone, registered to Yolanda, was in Kwame's possession, a gift from his mother to keep him connected. On December 22nd, detectives arrested Kwame Wilson, Yolanda's 24-year-old son, at his apartment in the North Austin neighborhood. The following day, December 23rd, they apprehended Eugene Spencer, 22, from the South Side, and Loriana Johnson, 23, from the far South Side. Kwame was charged with murder and home invasion, Spencer with first-degree murder, home invasion, and aggravated discharge of a firearm, and Johnson with murder and home invasion for her role as an accomplice. Cook County Judge Adam Bourgeois Jr., denying bail, called the crime a heinous act during their bond hearing. The news sent shockwaves through Uptown, where Yolanda's salon, Nappy Headz, remained a beacon of her legacy. How could her own son be involved? Kwame Wilson, born December 3, 1989, was Yolanda's pride and joy. Yolanda supported Kwame's every ambition, buying him a Mustang, designer clothes and jewelry, and even covering legal fees after a BB gun arrest in his teens. As young QC, Kwame chased a rap career, performing at local clubs and posting music online, but success eluded him. Friends like Ayanna Anderson, a stylist at Nappy Headz, told the Chicago Sun-Times, "She gave him everything he wanted. Yet, Kwame's dreams outpaced his reality, and his mother's wealth became a target. Just 1 week after Yolanda's death on September 2, 2012, Kwame began draining her bank accounts. As the sole beneficiary of her $90,000 savings and 2 life insurance policies, he withdrew large sums. His spending was extravagant and brazen. He customized his Mustang with gull-wing doors, bought Air Jordans, gold chains, and $1,500 puppies, and splurged on designer outfits. In a YouTube video that later haunted the case, Kwame stood in a parking lot, tossing stacks of cash to a crowd, boasting, "I don't play no games, man. I do this for real." The video showed him reveling in his newfound wealth while Yolanda's family grieved. Eugene Spencer, 22 at the time of his arrest, lived on South Rockwell Street in Chicago's South Side. Public records offer little about his early life, but he was a known associate of Kwame's, connected through neighborhood ties. Prosecutors later revealed that Kwame hired Spencer for $3,500 to execute the crime, though Spencer claimed he received only $70. Spencer's role was direct. He entered Yolanda's apartment, armed with a gun, and carried out the fatal act, shooting and stabbing her, while Curtis Wyatt, Yolanda's boyfriend, fought to intervene. Loriana Johnson, 23, resided on East 131st Place and was Kwame's former girlfriend. Her role was logistical, but crucial. She drove Spencer to and from Yolanda's apartment on September 2, 2012, acting as the getaway driver. Johnson later claimed she believed the plan was a robbery, not a murder, a defense her family supported. Johnson's relationship with Kwame, which lasted over a year, drew her into the plot, complicating her culpability. The interrogations, conducted in late December 2013, were intense and revealing. Kwame, questioned by Detective Michelle Wood, initially deflected blame. He admitted to planning a robbery for financial gain, saying it was supposed to be a robbery, but insisted he never intended Yolanda's death. When pressed about the second phone registered to Yolanda, he confirmed it was his, a gift from his mother. Wood's frustration was palpable. She asked, "What's wrong with you? Seriously, what's wrong with you?" Kwame pointed fingers at Spencer, claiming he acted alone, but phone records contradicted his story, showing calls to Spencer before and after the crime. Kwame had spoken to his mother about 40 minutes earlier and told her that he was coming over. Yolanda was waiting for her son to arrive. The door to the apartment was unlocked, so there were no signs of forced entry. The real mastermind was Kwame Wilson. Investigators determined that in addition to supplying Spencer with the gun, he had given him clothes and detergent to make it look like he lived in the building. Eugene Spencer's interrogation was a turning point. Initially, he claimed he was set up, describing a struggle at Yolanda's door and hearing gunshots. After hours of questioning, he confessed to entering the apartment, shooting Yolanda in the head at close range and stabbing her twice. He said Kwame called during the act, instructing, "Make sure that bitch is dead." Spencer admitted feeling pressured, believing Kwame had manipulated him, but his confession tied him directly to the crime scene. Loriana Johnson was less forthcoming. She maintained she thought the plan was a robbery, a claim her attorney later emphasized. Johnson's statements focused on her role as the driver, admitting she drove Spencer to Uptown but denying knowledge of the full plan. Her cooperation, though limited, helped prosecutors map the conspiracy, as phone records showed her communicating with Kwame and Spencer around the crime's timeline. The motive, as prosecutors laid out, was chillingly simple: greed. Kwame, desperate to fund his rap career, targeted Yolanda's $90,000 savings, life insurance policies, and salon business. The arrests of Kwame Wilson, Eugene Spencer, and Loriana Johnson in December 2013 marked a turning point in the investigation into Yolanda Holmes' death. But for her family, the pain was far from over. Let's walk through the courtroom battles, the arguments, the verdicts, and the lasting impact on those who cherished Yolanda. along with the latest updates on this heartbreaking case. The legal process began in earnest after the arrests, but it was a slow grind. The Cook County court system, known for its meticulous handling of high-profile cases, set the stage for a complex legal battle. By early 2015, Johnson's case diverged from the others. She pleaded guilty to armed robbery, a lesser charge, acknowledging her role in driving Spencer, but maintaining she believed the plan was a robbery, not a murder. On February 27, 2015, she was sentenced to 14 years, with credit for time served. The trials for Kwame and Spencer, however, were more protracted. Both were held without bail, their hearings delayed by the complexity of the evidence: phone records, surveillance footage, confessions, and witness testimony. By March 2019, nearly 7 years after Yolanda's death, their cases went to trial at the George Layton Criminal Courthouse. The two men were tried simultaneously, but before separate juries, a strategy to ensure fairness given their differing roles. Cook County Judge Stanley Sachs presided, and the courtroom was packed with Yolanda's family, including her sister Yolanda Holmes and Aunt Sandra Jackson, who sat behind prosecutors each day. The trial, lasting a week, was an emotional ordeal, with evidence laying bare the depths of Kwame's betrayal. Prosecutors, led by Assistant State's Attorney Maura White, built a meticulous case rooted in digital and physical evidence. Phone records showed Kwame communicating with Spencer and Johnson before, during, and after the crime, including a call where he instructed Spencer to make sure that bitch is dead. Surveillance footage captured Spencer entering Yolanda's building at 4:32 a.m. on September 2, 2012, using an access code Kwame provided. Curtis Wyatt, Yolanda's boyfriend, testified that he fought Spencer, who shot and stabbed Yolanda before fleeing. The prosecution played Kwame's YouTube video, showing him throwing cash to a crowd to illustrate his reckless spending of Yolanda's money. They highlighted Spencer's confession, where he admitted shooting Yolanda in the head and stabbing her twice after Kwame's call. Johnson's guilty plea and statements corroborated the conspiracy, though she wasn't called as a witness. The broken gun, knife, and earpiece from the crime scene, combined with the phone's digital footprint, formed an ironclad narrative. Prosecutors emphasized the personal nature of the crime, calling it matricide, the murder of one's own mother. Whatever he wanted, his mother gave to him: a car, a job. One could say he was spoiled, Judge Sachs later said. Kwame's defense, led by attorney Stephen Richards, argued that the police had coerced his confession and fed him details. They claimed Kwame believed the plan was a robbery, not a murder, echoing his interrogation statement. It was supposed to be a robbery. The defense pointed to inconsistencies in Spencer's account, suggesting he acted independently. They also challenged the reliability of phone records, arguing the calls didn't prove intent to kill. Kwame's team tried to humanize him, noting his youth and lack of prior violent history, but the YouTube video and his lavish spending undermined their efforts. Spencer's defense took a different tack, attempting to shift blame to Curtis Wyatt. They argued Wyatt, who fought Spencer, could have been involved, citing his failed polygraph test from 2012. Spencer's initial confession, that he struggled with another man and only heard gunshots, was played to sow doubt. His attorney, Michael McHale, claimed Spencer was manipulated by Kwame and feared being set up. As Spencer stated in his interrogation, "I felt like I was being set up." The defense challenged the earpiece's DNA, noting it remained unmatched, and questioned Wyatt's identification, suggesting trauma clouded his memory. Despite these efforts, the physical evidence and Spencer's later admission of shooting and stabbing Yolanda were hard to dismiss. On March 5, 2019, Kwame's jury deliberated for just over 2 hours before convicting him of first-degree murder, attempted murder, of Curtis Wyatt, and home invasion. Spencer's jury took nearly 12 hours over 2 days, returning guilty verdicts on the same charges on March 6. The swift verdicts reflected the strength of the prosecution's case. Yolanda's family, seated in the front row, wept as the forewoman read the counts against Spencer, their grief tempered by relief. Sentencing came on January 31, 2020. Judge Sachs, addressing both men, condemned the crime's brutality. Kwame was sentenced to 99 years, 45 years for murder, 25 years for attempted murder, and 29 years for home invasion, to be served consecutively. Spencer received 100 years, 45 years for murder, 25 years for attempted murder, and 30 years for home invasion. The sentences were effectively life terms, with Spencer's parole date set for March 22, 2080, per Illinois Department of Corrections records. Loriana Johnson, having pleaded guilty in 2015, was released on parole in 2020 after serving 7 years. When asked if he had anything to say, Kwame, with Yolanda's name tattooed on his shoulder, said, "I just want to say, nobody loved my mother more than me," a statement met with skepticism by the court. The trial and verdicts brought closure, but deepened the family's wounds. Sandra Jackson, Yolanda's aunt, told the Chicago Sun-Times, "After all this, we still don't understand why he did it." As of May 2025, no significant developments have emerged since the 2020 sentencings. Kwame Wilson and Eugene Spencer remain incarcerated at Menard Correctional Center in Chester, Illinois, serving their 99 and 100-year sentences, respectively, per Illinois Department of Corrections records. A 2023 Illinois appellate court decision upheld Spencer's convictions, rejecting claims of ineffective counsel and unconstitutional sentencing. No appeals or parole hearings for Kwame have been reported, and given their sentences, both men are likely to spend their lives in prison. Yolanda Holmes' story is a stark reminder that greed can corrupt even the closest bonds. Her life, filled with generosity and community spirit, was stolen by those she trusted most, leaving a void in Chicago's Uptown. The trials delivered justice, but they couldn't heal the scars left on her family. As we close this true crime chapter, one question lingers. What drives someone to betray the person who gave them everything? Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of Chicago's most heartbreaking cases. If this story gripped you, hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and join our community of true crime fans. Share your thoughts in the comments. Did the verdicts bring justice for Yolanda? Check out our other videos for more stories that unravel the human side of crime. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and keep chasing the truth with Checkered Sky.